Do you believe like secret elite like the Illuminati or Freemasons control the world?
I think yes.
Everybody's controlled. Everybody's controlled. Nobody's thinking. Nobody's free. Everybody think they're free, but nobody's free.
Does a secret elite control the world? What do you think?
I love them. I can't wait to join them.
A recent poll in the UK suggests that far more people believe in conspiracy theories than previously thought. For example, nearly a quarter believe that COVID-19 was a government hoax. Even more people, a third, believe the government and media are covering up information about terrorist attacks. The poll also suggests that the growing influence of social media has a lot to do with the growing belief in such theories. Here's how the mainstream media, in particular Britain's left-leaning Guardian newspaper, reported on the poll. About a third of people believe in the Great Replacement theory, the idea that white Americans and Europeans are being replaced by non-white immigrants. The same proportion believe 15-minute cities are a government plan to surveil people and restrict their freedom. And again, that magic number, a third, believe the cost of living crisis is a plot to control the public. The poll, which was carried out by King's College London, revealed a growing number of people are shunning mainstream sources and relying exclusively on alternative media. And when we carried out our own mini poll in central London, we found there was no shortage of conspiracy theorists willing to expound on a range of topics.
Does a secret elite rule the world? What do you think?
Yes, clearly there are elites, yes. World Economic Forum, so economics, trade, a lot of social engineering projects all over the world, yes.
Do you believe like secret elite like the Illuminati or Freemasons control the world?
I think yes. Because we hear everything from the Epstein Island, like the Rothschild family and stuff like that. So I think there's like a lot going on.
I believe that they're like almost trying to push us to the point of to see at what point we actually break. When you look at things like housing prices and cost of living and whatever, and things just keep going up and up and up, at what point can you push it to us then saying, okay, we're not taking it anymore?
1 in 4 people in the UK believe that the coronavirus was a hoax. Would you say that you're one of those 1 in 4?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was the big... They just tried to see how far they can get with the lie. This is just a big game. So that's so scary that all the time now what you're thinking is, what's next? Nobody's questioning almost anymore. It's a very small percentage. And if, like I'm saying, if you question them, they shut you down.
Does a secret elite control the world? What do you think?
I love them. I can't wait to join them.
Well, at least he's honest. Anyway, some people call them conspiracy theorists. Others might say they're independent thinkers. So let's just get our definitions straight. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, a conspiracy theory is one that explains an event or set of circumstances as the result of a secret plot by usually powerful conspirators. Collins' dictionary expands on that by saying you usually use this term to suggest you think this is unlikely. Well, let's bring in our guest now, and Brian Dunning is the host of Skeptoid podcast, dedicated to myth-busting urban legends and conspiracies. And we also have Dr. Ricky Green, who researches why people are drawn to conspiracy theories in the first place. Welcome to both of you. Ricky Green, if I could start with you. First of all, do you believe the results of this survey?
I'm a bit skeptical about it. I think the figure is inflated personally, and that's for a few reasons, which I'll explain. The wording of the question is quite vague. So just to ask, do you think coronavirus is a hoax? And yeah, we find that there's 25% people that believe that it's true. Well, there's 9% that think it's definitely true, 14% that think it's probably true. But there are so many contradicting theories around coronavirus that I don't think it's helpful to lump it all into one sort of question, because there's contradicting theories about whether it was a hoax or whether it was manufactured on purpose, whether it's real or not. And I think people may be answering this poll with all of these different elements in mind. So, they may be answering it thinking about one aspect. And that's kind of why I think it's a little bit inflated. And also there's a YouGov poll that was conducted around about the same time that asked the question that was a bit more specific, and it was asked, do you think that coronavirus was a myth and that it was created by, secret powerful forces? And in the UK, only 3% of people said that they thought that was true. And again, they changed the response option. So they asked them as a percentage, like how much of a percentage do you think this is true, versus just giving the 5 options that the other poll gave. So yeah, I'm a little bit skeptical of the poll, and I think it would.
I think you make a very interesting point there, Ricky. So when the question became more extreme, do you think it was created and deliberately and used to do X, Y, and Z? A tiny proportion of people said yes. But when it was a broader question, a hoax, people read into it whatever they wanted to read into it. For example, when they see the government, for example, giving out strict rules, but then not abiding by them themselves. For example, the whole Partygate scandal, they start to think, well, that aspect of it might have been a hoax or exaggerated.
Precisely, yeah. And that's kind of what I think maybe is going on in this particular poll and that question. It's just very broad, and people maybe are thinking about all sorts of different things. You know, there's, as I said, there's lots of different elements to it, and people might think that some elements are a hoax and some are not. But when you ask it broadly like that, then you're going to get, a higher agreement. And as seen with the other poll and the different response options, there's much less agreement with that similar statement.
Brian, which of the polls struck you as most alarming?
Well, I hear what you're saying about the way the questions were worded. Certainly, the trends that we see in these results in all of these questions, they don't surprise me much at all. Whether the percentages are high or low, as he says, does depend on a lot of things. For example, you can ask, should Donald Trump be indicted? Or you can precede that question with some information. He was accused of doing this, 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 and this. Do you think he should be indicted?
Right.
You're going to get very different answers depending on how you ask those. But generally, the trends that we're seeing here are in line with my experience. We do have a surprising number of people believing in almost any extreme conspiracy theory.
So the framing of the question is very important then, Brian. You said a surprising number of people. What is the pattern? Because we noticed when we were looking at this survey, it was roughly a third of people believed in so-called conspiracy theories.
Again, it depends on the conspiracy theory, because every demographic is going to be warmer to one conspiracy and colder to another. So most of the conspiracy theories we see in this particular one tends to correlate to more conservative groups. We could show another list of conspiracy theories that would be accepted more by more liberal groups of people. So, you know, really, you've got spikes of belief in everything, in every kind of theory you can come up with, no matter what it is.
No, that's a good question. That was a good point, rather, Brian. I mean, Ricky, can we pick up on that? The actual questions that were asked, or rather the conspiracy theories that were put forward, do you accept the premise that all of those things are actually conspiracy theories?
Yeah, to the degree that of what a definition of a conspiracy theory is. And conspiracy theory is a belief that 2 or more people, you know, a group have coordinated in secret to achieve an outcome. And importantly, this conspiracy is of public interest, but it's not public knowledge. And that's kind of what makes a conspiracy theory. And, you know, until we know exactly we know the actual origins of COVID-19, for instance, and other elements, you know, we just have to kind of go by what the official version is at the moment until that gets corrected. And until then, most of these are conspiracy theories until they are proven otherwise.
And yet each one of them has a little grain of truth to them, or something that people can hang on to and say, well, I could see why you'd ask me that. Can I give an example? So we have one here. Central bank digital currencies will be used by governments to control people's money and restrict their freedom. Now, there's no evidence for that first part of the question about the digital currencies. It's quite a long way away before they're used in different countries. But the bit about governments wanting to control people's money and restrict their freedom, I mean, you can see how people might say, yeah, that's quite natural. They'd want to do that. And then they might look over at Canada and see that Justin Trudeau's government is seizing people's bank accounts, you know, truckers' bank accounts, because they were protesting against the mandatory vaccine. So is that not the case then, Ricky, that they see a part of the question that rings true and then they buy the whole thing?
Yeah, perhaps. And I've always said that as well. There's sometimes a kernel of truth in a lot of these conspiracy theories. And I don't know too much about the particular one that you mentioned, so I won't go into that too much. But yes, there are there are examples of conspiracy theories that turn out to be true. Like Watergate, for example.
Right.
Before that came out to be true, it was a conspiracy theory, but now it's accepted as fact. Other things as well, such as the Gulf of Tonkin, so this justification for USA going to war with Vietnam, has apparently come out as like one of their boats being bombed may have been a hoax. And when things like this are found out to be true, then these are your kernels of truth that people will latch onto, because if things have happened before, then they can happen again. But the number of conspiracy theories that have turned out to be true compared to the number of conspiracy theories that are out there there's a massive gulf between them, and there's much more unwarranted conspiracy theories than there are proven ones.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
Brian, Ricky mentioned the Gulf of Tonkin there, which was, the Americans using an attack that may or may not have happened as a pretext to escalate the war in Vietnam. One of the questions kind of relates to war, doesn't it? 1 in 5 people think that the UK government carried out the 7/7 attack in London to encourage support for war in the Middle East. Now, that has been asserted without evidence, but it's true to say that governments have lied to go to war, isn't it, Brian?
Absolutely. The Gulf of Tonkin is a perfect example. What happened in that case was there was a gunboat, an American gunboat, was supposedly in a firefight with some radar targets, and as it was happening, the captain was on the phone to Washington, D.C. saying, "I don't think there's actually any boats there." And there was a U.S. senator relaying that to the news as it was happening. So that was known from day one, literally, that this was a very shaky incident that probably didn't take place.
And President
So people
Johnson
do
ran
see
with it.
that.
That's the problem.
Exactly, yeah. And I think, at that point, war was inevitable, and they were going to come up with anything they could as an excuse to jump in. So yeah, that's a perfect example. People can point to that and say, "See, it's happened here, so it can happen anytime." And therefore, anything that I want to believe is justified.
Yeah, so to some degree, governments bear responsibility for reducing their own credibility in the eyes of the people. We're coming towards the end of the segment. Ricky, if I could ask you about social media, another thing the poll addressed. The poll suggests that the more people rely on social media and not mainstream media, the more likely they are to believe in conspiracy theories.
And there's been a lot of research to try and find out whether social media has increased conspiracy theorizing or beliefs in people. And it's not a very clear-cut answer, because we've always been creating conspiracy theories, way before the internet and social media. So it's quite difficult. I mean, it seems like it would be the case that, because you can have these echo chambers online now, so you can join groups that only really talk about your point of view of the world. And in that sense, then, yeah, they can perpetuate conspiracy theories, because then they seem more acceptable in mainstream. But yeah, that's what.
Brian, same question to you, really. Has the use of social media made it more likely that people will believe in conspiracy theories?
I'm a bit of an outlier because I don't necessarily think so. A lot of my job involves going back and reading newspaper articles from 300 years ago. And you'll see people talking about and believing the same kinds of things then that they did today. Now, today with social media, information can spread a lot farther, a lot faster, as can misinformation. I tend to feel that a rising tide raises all boats equally, though. So just as much as we can say social media makes it more likely to spread conspiracy theories, it also makes it more likely to spread scientific skepticism and critical thinking, the tools that really are the ones that help prevent people from getting sucked into these belief systems.
Brian Dunning and Ricky Green, thank you so much for your contributions to the Nexus today. Much appreciated. Now, of course,
thank you.
One of the biggest subjects for conspiracy theories is who really killed President John F. Kennedy. And while that question was not part of the British poll, we thought we'd just hear from his nephew, Robert Kennedy Jr., who's hoping to become America's next leader.
The First Amendment protects conspiracy theories. The First Amendment protects things that are untrue. The Constitution was written for hard times, and the remedy for bad speech is more speech. It's not cutting people off.
Well, RFK Jr., as he's known, has been accused of being a conspiracy theorist himself over his long-held anti-vaccine views. YouTube took down all videos of his recent interview with Jordan Peterson, and Google, YouTube's parent company, told Fox News that YouTube removed a video from the Jordan Peterson channel for violating YouTube's general vaccine misinformation policy, which prohibits content that alleges that vaccines cause chronic side effects outside of rare side effects that are recognized by health authorities. Both Peterson and Kennedy have accused the platform of censorship and interfering with a presidential campaign. Let's bring in our two new guests now. And Dr. Eric Fagelding is an epidemiologist who fights medical misinformation, and Tony Hinton is a consultant surgeon with more than 3 decades experience in the UK's National Health Service. Thank you and welcome to both of you. Eric Fagelding, if I may start with you, do you think that YouTube did the right and responsible thing by pulling RFK's interview down, the one he did with Jordan Peterson?
Yeah, absolutely. If anything, RFK Jr. has a complete history of misinformation on vaccines. If anything, people call him the king of vaccine misinformation because of his organization. And, years ago, I also want to remind people, he also questioned the measles vaccines. He's also purports that 5G radio towers and Wi-Fi cause a whole slew of different diseases, which they don't. And and of course, during COVID, he spreads more vaccine misinformation than anyone. So this latest one, he also was talking about, transgender chemicals. Like, he is just well known as a, misinformation person.
The argument against it would be that he's running to be president, well, to be the Democrat nominee to replace Joe Biden, and therefore he ought not to be denied a platform to express himself.
But is there a rule that, running for president, therefore, outranks any other rule on misinformation and disinformation? I'm not sure I've seen anything that says those other rules, basically sort of supersedes anything about public health. So I think, and also many people know that Steve Bannon, Trump's former advisor, is the biggest proponent of RFK Jr. That, they actually admitted out loud this. They said the quiet part out loud just recently, yesterday, that, RFK running will soften up Biden. This is all a big political ploy. And just because anyone who's a U.S. born natural citizen can declare the president if they're over age 35. And it doesn't mean that should supersede all other public health imperatives.
They won't get anything like the same traction as RFK, though. I mean, he's had millions of views. Tony Hinton, do you think YouTube did the right thing pulling down that interview?
No, I think transparent, open debate is always good. You may not agree with people. There's much of what RFK says that I would find very strange if it was true. But I would defend his right to say that. And it's up to other people to put up the opposite arguments and show the evidence as where he's wrong. I don't think censorship ever works well. If we look at the last American election, there was lots of censorship that went on, for instance, about President Biden's son's laptop. And it was all said to be a conspiracy theory at the time. And there was no data on the laptop. And of course, now it looks like there's some sort of plea bargain going on so that he pleads guilty to a couple of tax charges and I think possession of an illegal firearm, where he won't apparently go to prison and will just get a slap on the wrist. So that may have affected the last election result. And who is it in these social media companies that decides what is medical misinformation? That they don't have that expertise to decide. It's much better for other people to be able to put another YouTube video or comment on that YouTube video and say why it's incorrect.
Eric Fagelding?
Well, first of all, you know how in social media works. A lie can go around the earth 10 times before the truth has the chance to put its boots on. And that's, we were trying to play this whack-a-mole with these disinformation. I'll directly say it's disinformation experts who spread these lies that endanger people's public health. And meanwhile, the government, scientists, they're busy doing research. We don't have time to fight these disinformation people and trying to catch up with their social media prowess. But before the debunk is heard, which again, only a fraction of people will hear the debunk because debunk things just doesn't get the same traction. 99% or more people will have heard
Of course,
the
yeah.
lies, and a large fraction will believe it. And it's
Eric,
not just about free speech. There's dangerous speech that kills people.
Eric, the problem is people will argue that things that are conspiracy theories today are down the road proved to be actually very credible. For example, in 2020 and 2021, I saw many, many headlines on CNN, The Guardian, and elsewhere, saying that anybody saying that the coronavirus came out of the Wuhan lab, it leaked, was a conspiracy theorist. Now, the FBI and the Energy Department believe that is a very credible explanation and is no longer called a conspiracy theory, is it?
No, first of all, I want you to clarify. The conspiracy theorists said it was a bioengineered.
They were also, forgive me, but I've read it very specifically that anyone saying that it was leaked from the lab was also a conspiracy theorist.
Well,
everyone was being called a conspiracy theorist in those days.
But, these recent claims are also, like, first of all, the U.S. has 7 intelligence agencies. Only 2 have made a statement. The rest of them either said no or have.
Sure, but nobody's calling it a conspiracy.
There's no consensus.
But nobody's calling it a conspiracy theory anymore, are they?
No, but the conspiracy theory is that China purposefully released it up onto the world.
Well, you've
and
changed. You're changing the definition of it now, because I remember very clearly anyone saying it wasn't just occurring naturally and got into the population. Anyone saying that it came from the Wuhan laboratory, even if it was leaked unintentionally, that was a conspiracy theory. And that is no longer a conspiracy theory, is it?
Well, I think that the evidence has no longer, that is the key word. Time, we have different evidence. And I think the other key things, we haven't really solved the fact that, first of all, why were there wastewaters that detected COVID? Why was outside of China in like October and November in Italy? In Italy, there's cases of a child being infected. There's a lot of clinical evidence as well as wastewater evidence way before Wuhan. Those have never been explained in France and Italy and many other places. I think this is where, like, again, you can cite a few sources. Again, Energy Department conclusion was with low confidence, and FBI doesn't specialize in this area. They're domestic, not international. And the 5 other U.S. agencies have not come to that conclusion whatsoever. So I would say that it's not conclusive. And again, back in 2020 and 2023 are very, very different things.
Right. Well, somebody might argue that in 2026, RFK may be proved to be correct in some manner. I'm not saying he will be, but 3 years down the line, somebody may have to eat their words. Tony Hinton?
Well, I'd say let's look at some recent conspiracy theories. And a lot of these conspiracy theories come from, I would say, the authorities. So if we look at what we were sold on lockdown, that lockdown was going to save all these lives, I think we only have to mention one word, and that's Sweden, to look at the country that didn't do these lockdowns, didn't use masks, didn't close their schools, and they have the best excess mortality data figures in the whole of Europe. If we look at the so-called safe and effective COVID vaccines, now I'm somebody that took 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine. And the reason I took that is that I was assured by my government and by the medical hierarchy that it was going to protect my patients. It was going to stop me catching COVID and stop me passing it on to my patients. But within about a month of my second jab, I knew people that were catching COVID even though they were double jabbed. So that was obviously false. And if we look at the latest data, very big study from the Cleveland Clinic, looking at over 40,000 of their employees, and they divided them into 2 groups. One group who were not up to date with their COVID vaccine, and another group who were up to date with their COVID vaccine program. And the group that were up to date with their COVID vaccine were 33% more likely to catch COVID.
Dr. Fagerling, come in.
They're not effective.
Yeah, so first of all, we can talk about Sweden. And first of all, also, I want to point out that variants, the vaccine was designed against the original Wuhan strain, not against subsequent variants. And we've obviously learned that the variants, and I've been warning about variants for a long time. So I'm not the person who says, oh, this will protect you from infection. And the variants obviously causes breakthroughs. And thirdly, regarding that Cleveland study, yes, there was differences in infection rates, but in terms of hospitalization rates and mortality rates, those who were vaccinated, boosted, and up to date had significantly lower hospitalization and mortality rates. And that is what we were emphasizing for the majority of the time. And again, those who were saying that you can't get infected, that was before the advent of the variants.
Eric
So I
Fagelding?
think you can see selective things and try to mislead people about them, or cherry pick, just like they say, oh, lockdowns don't work. There's tons of studies, 10 times more studies to show lockdowns did initially work in the first wave.
Eric Fagelding and Dr. Tony Hinton, thank you so much for your contributions, much appreciated. And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. If you want to see this episode or any of our previous episodes, go to our channel on YouTube. Just type in Nexus TRT World. Till next week then, goodbye.